The story begins in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, where the gentle hum of daily life lulls its residents into a peaceful rhythm. Nestled in a cozy house at the end of a cul-de-sac, Sarah, a kind-hearted woman in her early 30s, had recently moved to the area. She was a solitary figure, not by choice, but because life had thrown its share of challenges her way. Her comforting routine involved long walks with her dog, quiet afternoons with books, and the occasional visit to the local cafe. Though she was content with her solitary existence, Sarah often found herself thinking about something that troubled her, the stray animals she saw wandering around the neighborhood. One crisp fall evening, as Sarah returned from her daily walk, she noticed a cat sitting at the edge of her front yard. Its fur was matted and its eyes looked weary, but the way it sat waiting made Sarah pause. She had seen this cat before, darting between alleys and hidden corners, always keeping its distance from people. It was a mystery to Sarah, as she hadn't seen any other animals in the area and didn't know where the cat came from. Despite her natural hesitation, Sarah felt a deep pang of empathy. The cat's gaunt appearance spoke volumes. This was an animal in need. After a moment of contemplation, Sarah reached inside her home for a small plate and some leftovers she had from dinner. She carefully placed the food outside and retreated to watch from the window, curiosity bubbling within her. The cat eyed the food warily for a few moments, but then with a cautious leap, it finally stepped forward and began eating. This simple act of kindness marked the beginning of something she couldn't have expected. The cat, now a frequent visitor, showed up more and more often, coming to her porch in the early morning hours or just as dusk began to fall. Sarah continued to leave food for it, each time with a mixture of joy and concern, wondering where the cat came from and why it was so persistent in seeking her help. But Sarah's bond with the cat grew slowly, as she didn't want to force the animal into a relationship it wasn't ready for. It wasn't long before she started noticing more than just a stray cat in need. With each passing day, something changed in her heart. The little acts of kindness she gave to the cat began to fill a space she didn't know existed. It was as if the cat had found a way to fill a small, empty part of her life, one that had always yearned for connection but had been left untapped. Despite her growing attachment, Sarah still didn't understand the full story behind the stray cat. She didn't know how it had come to be on her doorstep, or if it had a family somewhere nearby, but every time she looked at its eyes, she felt a connection she couldn't explain. The atmosphere in Sarah's house felt peaceful as autumn leaves danced in a breeze. But this cat, this unassuming creature, would change her life in ways she had never imagined. Little did she know, the cat wasn't just visiting her for food. It was the beginning of a chapter in her life that would lead to a shocking and life-changing discovery. In the next few days, Sarah would be introduced to an unexpected side of the story, one that would both surprise and deeply move her heart. As the days went on, Sarah's connection with the stray cat deepened. Each morning, the cat would appear at her doorstep, waiting patiently for her to bring out the food. It became a comforting ritual, one that Sarah came to look forward to. She even started leaving small treats for the cat, hoping to build trust. The once wary animal had gradually started to approach her with more confidence. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this cat's presence in her life, something she hadn't yet discovered. One chilly evening, as Sarah sat on her porch enjoying the evening air, she noticed something unusual. The cat was acting differently. It seemed more anxious than usual, pacing around in small circles, glancing nervously over its shoulder as though it was watching for something. Sarah's curiosity grew, and she quietly stood up to observe, not wanting to disturb the cat. She couldn't help but wonder if the cat was sensing something she wasn't aware of. As the evening grew darker, Sarah saw movement from the shadows. A tall figure emerged from the darkness, walking slowly toward her house. It was a man, but he didn't seem to be heading in any particular direction. His eyes were fixed on the stray cat, and as he approached, the cat stiffened, its body tense. It let out a low growl, and Sarah could see the hairs on its back stand up. Alarmed, Sarah instinctively stepped forward, unsure of who this man was or why he was so focused on the cat. The stranger didn't seem to notice Sarah at first. He crouched down near the cat, reaching out a hand. The cat, sensing danger, hissed and retreated, its eyes wild with fear. The man stood up quickly, muttering something under his breath as he turned and walked away without a second glance. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she processed what had just happened. Why had the cat reacted so aggressively toward this man? And why had the man shown such interest in the stray? It wasn't just the cat's reaction that unsettled Sarah. It was the eerie sense of familiarity in the stranger's gaze, something about his eyes that felt both menacing and familiar at the same time. She had no idea who he was, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this man's presence had something to do with the cat's strange behavior. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself more and more anxious every time the cat showed up on her porch. She had already grown attached to the stray, and now, with this unsettling encounter lingering in her mind, she worried for its safety. She continued leaving food out for the cat, but her thoughts were consumed by the mystery of the man's appearance and the cat's fearful reaction. Late one night, after an evening of reflection, Sarah decided she couldn't simply sit idly by. She needed to uncover more about this stray cat, its mysterious past, and the stranger who had made her uneasy. Armed with her curiosity and a sense of determination, she started asking around the neighborhood, hoping to gather some information. She knocked on doors, inquired at the local cafe, and even reached out to a few animal shelters to see if anyone had heard anything about a cat fitting the description of the one that had appeared at her doorstep. To her surprise, one of the neighbors, an elderly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, had seen the cat before. Mrs. Jenkins recalled that a similar cat had been spotted in the neighborhood for months, but it had always seemed to be avoiding people. The old woman also mentioned that there had been rumors of an individual, a man who had once lived in the area, who had recently been seen around the neighborhood. However, Mrs. Jenkins couldn't remember his name or any further details. She only remembered that he had been very protective of the cat when he lived here, more so than anyone had ever realized. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she felt a growing sense of unease. The puzzle pieces were starting to come together, but the truth remained just out of reach. Why was the cat so afraid of the man? What had happened between them? Was it possible that the stray had been abandoned, left to fend for itself because of something dark in its past? The more Sarah thought about it, the more certain she became that the cat's fear of the stranger wasn't just about survival. There was a deeper story hidden beneath the surface, a story that the cat seemed unwilling to reveal. Sarah was determined to find the answers, not only for her own peace of mind, but also for the safety of the cat she had come to care for. The mystery had only deepened, and Sarah knew that she was getting closer to uncovering something much bigger than she could have ever anticipated. The events that were unfolding were leading her down a path that would soon reveal a shocking truth, one that would forever change her relationship with the stray cat and alter the course of her life in ways she could never have predicted. The following evening, as Sarah sat on her porch, the events of the past few days weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't shake the sense that something terrible was about to happen. The cat had been acting increasingly agitated, refusing to come too close to the house, always scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. Sarah had been watching from her window, waiting for the cat's usual appearance. The air was heavy with tension, and the shadows of dusk seemed to stretch longer than usual. As the sun began to set, Sarah noticed the familiar shape of the stray cat slinking toward the porch. Its body was low to the ground, moving in a stealthy, calculated manner. The cat's eyes were fixed on something ahead. Sarah's pulse quickened. She followed its gaze and saw the same man from the previous night walking down the street toward her home. This time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed the local police, her heart racing. She couldn't take any chances. The way the cat was reacting, backing away, ears flattened against its head, eyes wide with terror, was more than enough for her to know that something was wrong. This man had to be involved with whatever had caused the cat's fear, and now it seemed he was returning with intent. The man's footsteps grew louder as he approached the house, and Sarah's breathing became shallow. She watched from her window, feeling a knot tightening in her stomach. The stray cat's distress grew more pronounced, and Sarah could see its hackles rising. The cat let out a loud yowl, a desperate warning to the man. But the man didn't stop. In fact, he walked faster, as if drawn to the cat like a predator to its prey. Before Sarah could react further, the man reached the gate and stepped onto the porch. Sarah's pulse raced as she quickly ran out to confront him. The cat darted into the bushes, disappearing into the safety of the yard, but didn't stop watching from the shadows. "Stop right there," Sarah shouted, her voice shaky but firm. The man paused, looking up at her with cold, calculating eyes. For a moment, there was an eerie silence as they locked eyes, and then he spoke, his voice a low growl. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said, but there was something in his tone that made Sarah's skin crawl. "I'm just looking for my cat." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced as she pieced the puzzle together. This man was the one who had once cared for the cat, but what had happened? Why was the cat so terrified of him? What had he done to make the animal fear him so deeply? I know what you did to that cat. Sarah snapped, her anger flaring. I've seen the way it reacts to you. It's scared, terrified even. You've heard it, haven't you? The man's face twisted into a sneer. You don't know anything about me, he spat, taking a step closer to Sarah. That cat was mine, and you don't know what I had to do to protect it. Something inside Sarah told her that this was the moment she had been dreading. She needed to know the truth, but she wasn't prepared for the darkness that was about to be revealed. The man's eyes flickered nervously toward the bushes, and Sarah realized with a sudden jolt of fear that he wasn't just here to claim the cat. He was here to silence anyone who might expose the truth. Before Sarah could react, she heard the screech of tires. The police had arrived. The man froze, his expression hardening. You'll regret this, he growled, before turning to flee into the night, disappearing into the shadows. Sarah stood motionless for a moment, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The tension in her body slowly began to fade, but the realization that this wasn't just about a stray cat, but something much darker, gnawed at her. She had uncovered part of the story, but there was still so much more to learn. And of the police? They had to know that this was far from over. The officers quickly made their way toward Sarah, asking her questions and inspecting the area, but it was clear that the man was already long gone. They assured Sarah that they would look into the situation, but something told her this was just the beginning. As the police left, Sarah turned to the bushes where the stray cat had hidden. She was shaken, but she knew one thing for certain. The cat had known the danger all along, and it had led her right to the truth. Sarah's life, and the life of the stray cat, would never be the same again. This was only the beginning of a far more complex mystery that she had unwittingly stepped into. The moment the man had left, the cat emerged from the shadows, its eyes filled with a mixture of relief and wariness. It walked slowly back to Sarah, who knelt down, her heart swelling with both sorrow and determination. Whatever had happened to this animal in the past, Sarah knew that now, more than ever, she was going to protect it and ensure the truth came to light. The cat had led her this far, and she would not let it down now. In the wake of the dramatic confrontation, Sarah stood in her yard, the weight of the encounter settling heavily on her shoulders. The stray cat had retreated into the shadows again, cautious and wary, yet Sarah couldn't help but notice the deep, piercing gaze that the animal held as it watched the street for any signs of danger. It was clear that the cat still felt the lingering presence of the man who had threatened them both. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had uncovered only a fraction of the mystery, but one thing was certain. The man was hiding something darker, something that the cat had known all along. And now, it seemed, the cat had led her into the heart of that darkness. With the police having left the scene after a brief investigation, Sarah felt a gnawing sense of unease. They had taken down her statement, questioned her about the man, and assured her that they would investigate the situation further. But Sarah knew that there was more at play here than they could see. She had heard the man's words, their cryptic, threatening undertone, and there was no mistaking the cold menace in his voice. There was no question that he was dangerous, and that the cat, with its fearful reactions, had been trying to protect her all along. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She went back inside her house, retrieving the photos she had taken of the cat over the past few days. There was something about the cat's demeanor in these pictures that struck her. Its eyes, always so alert, watching and waiting, as if it knew that Sarah was the key to its salvation. The cat had led her here for a reason, and Sarah wasn't about to abandon it now. In her search for answers, Sarah decided to reach out to a local animal rescue organization that had previously helped her when she found abandoned animals. They had a reputation for investigating unusual cases like this, where animals had experienced trauma or been caught in dangerous situations. She knew they might have more insight into the cat's behavior, or even some information on the man who had been following it. The phone call felt like a small step, but in Sarah's mind, it was a giant leap toward uncovering the truth. The woman on the other end of the line listened intently, asking questions about the cat's condition, its behavior, and anything Sarah had observed. When Sarah mentioned the man, the voice on the phone hesitated, then became more serious. We've heard similar reports before, the woman said cautiously. Stray animals have been showing up in certain neighborhoods with signs of trauma, and there's been talk of someone following them. We'll send someone to meet with you as soon as possible. The call ended, but Sarah didn't feel a sense of relief. Instead, a growing sense of urgency filled her. What had she gotten herself into? The cat had known to avoid the man, had known to lead Sarah straight to him, and now Sarah was deeply entangled in a mystery that she couldn't walk away from. As dusk fell, Sarah stepped outside once again, this time with flashlight in hand. She needed to check on the cat, make sure it was safe and that no other danger had crept into the yard. Her mind kept flashing back to the man's warning. "You'll regret this." His words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. She walked cautiously toward the bushes where the cat had hidden earlier, scanning the ground for any signs of movement. The soft rustle of leaves was the only sound that filled the air, and Sarah's heart raced as she approached. She knelt down slowly, her eyes searching the darkness. And then, just as she thought the yard was quiet again, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The cat had emerged from the shadows once more. Its fur was ruffled, but it looked unharmed. For the first time that evening, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. The cat walked toward her, its eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and caution. It circled her a few times, as if trying to decide whether to trust her completely. When Sarah extended her hand, the cat didn't recoil or run. It instead leaned into her touch. The connection between them was undeniable. The cat was no longer just a stray. It was a companion in this strange, unpredictable journey. Sarah felt a sense of resolve take root deep within her. "Don't worry," she whispered softly, as if the cat could understand her. "I'm going to figure this out. I'll keep you safe." Just as Sarah was about to stand up, a movement in the distance caught her attention. A figure was walking down the street. The man. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her hand instinctively clutching the cat a little tighter. This was the second time tonight he had returned, and it was clear that he hadn't given up. As he drew nearer, Sarah's mind raced. She had to act quickly. There was no more time for waiting. She scooped up the cat in her arms and hurried back inside, closing the door with a firm click. Through the window, she saw the man stop in front of the house, his eyes scanning the darkened yard. He didn't seem to notice her hiding inside, but Sarah could feel the weight of his gaze from where she stood. This was no coincidence. The cat was part of something bigger, something that Sarah was only just beginning to unravel. And as the man lingered outside, Sarah knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of the danger that lay ahead. The following days were filled with tension as Sarah's life continued to spiral deeper into uncertainty. What had started as a simple act of kindness, leaving food for a stray cat, had now transformed into an investigation far beyond her control. She had found herself entwined in a situation that was both confusing and unsettling, with the once mysterious cat now playing a central role in her quest for answers. Sarah found herself on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. The man who had threatened her the night of the cat's arrival hadn't been seen again, but that didn't ease her nerves. Every time she stepped outside, her eyes scanned the street for any sign of him. The cat, too, seemed more alert. It had become more than just a stray, an ally in a battle Sarah didn't understand, but one she knew she couldn't avoid. One afternoon, just as Sarah was sitting down for tea, she received a call from the animal rescue organization she had contacted earlier. The woman on the other end of the line sounded concerned. "Sarah, we've been looking into this situation," she said, her voice serious. "You mentioned that the man might have been following the cat. We've gotten reports from other residents in the area of similar sightings. Something's not right. We need to move fast." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Her worst fears were starting to materialize. This wasn't just an isolated case of a stray animal in need, it was something more sinister. The connection between the man and the cat was becoming clearer, and the more Sarah thought about it, the more she began to realize that the cat had been trying to warn her all along. Before Sarah could respond, the woman on the phone continued, "We've arranged for a private investigator to come out. They'll work with you directly. We think this may be connected to a larger issue, one that involves more than just the cat." The mention of a private investigator made Sarah's heart race. It was one thing to feel uneasy about a potential threat. It was another to know that someone with experience in uncovering hidden truths would now be involved. The weight of the situation suddenly felt more real, more dangerous. As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a rising sense of urgency. She had to protect the cat, her companion, who had already shown such resilience and bravery. The cat wasn't just an innocent animal anymore. It was a key to something far greater, and Sarah was determined to uncover whatever dark truth lay behind its mysterious behavior. The days that followed were filled with a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Sarah's thoughts were consumed by the man, by the cat and by the strange connection between them. Was he really stalking the cat, or was there a deeper motive at play? The more Sarah thought about it, the more questions arose. Who was he? And why had the cat led her to him? It was during this time that the cat began to act even more strangely. It would sit at the window, staring into the distance, its ears perked up at every passing sound. Sarah tried to comfort it, but the cat seemed increasingly distant, as though it could sense something she couldn't. Every time Sarah attempted to approach, the cat would dart away, its eyes wide with fear. It was clear that it knew something was coming, something Sarah couldn't yet comprehend. Then, one evening, just as dusk began to settle over the neighborhood, Sarah noticed the unmistakable figure of the man standing at the edge of her yard once more. This time, however, he wasn't alone. Two other men stood with him, their faces shadowed under the streetlights, their eyes scanning the area. They looked like they were waiting for something, or someone. Fear gripped Sarah's chest as she watched from the window, unsure of what to do. The man had returned with reinforcements, and the cat, who had been acting so erratically over the past few days, now stood at the window, watching them with an intensity Sarah had never seen before. Its body was tense, its fur bristling with anticipation. Just as Sarah was about to retreat into the house, the cat made a move that startled her. It dashed toward the door. In a flurry of motion, it slipped outside, disappearing into the night. Without thinking, Sarah rushed after it. She couldn't let the cat face whatever danger awaited it, especially not with those men lurking in the shadows. Outside, the street was eerily quiet. The cat, now several yards ahead, paused at the edge of the yard, its eyes locked on the men who had gathered near the street. The tension in the air was palpable. Sarah stood frozen, watching as the cat seemed to beckon her forward, almost as if it was trying to lead her to something. She couldn't ignore it any longer. There was a part of her that felt deeply connected to this cat, like it had come into her life for a reason, one she was now determined to uncover. Suddenly, one of the men turned his head in Sarah's direction. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah's heart stopped. He knew she was there. He had been watching her all along. Without a second thought, Sarah darted forward, following the cat into the shadows of the alley behind her house. The men, realizing they were being followed, began to move toward her, their footsteps growing louder with each passing second. Sarah's pulse quickened as she pushed forward, the cat now a few steps ahead of her, its body tense with every move it made. The chase had begun again. The cat, once astray, had now become Sarah's only guide in this mysterious, dangerous game. She could feel the weight of her decision settling heavily on her, but there was no turning back. Whatever the truth was, she would follow it to the end, even if it led her into the unknown. As Sarah ventured deeper into the alley, her heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the footsteps of the men behind her, growing louder with each passing second. The cat, ever the elusive guide, darted between shadows, leading Sarah through a maze of narrow pathways. She could feel the tension mounting, but she knew she had no choice but to trust the animal that had brought her this far. The alleyway opened up into a quiet street, its dimly lit lamps casting long shadows on the pavement. Sarah paused, trying to get her bearings, when she noticed the cat had stopped in front of an old, abandoned building. The windows were boarded up, the doors slightly ajar as though inviting them inside. The cat stood motionless, staring at the entrance. Sarah hesitated. She could hear the men approaching rapidly. They weren't far behind. It was clear that whatever was happening here wasn't just about the cat anymore. This was a deeper mystery, one that could only be uncovered by following the cat's lead. Her instincts told her that whatever secret this building held, it was key to everything that had been unfolding. With a deep breath, Sarah walked toward the door, her every step filled with purpose. She knew the men were close, but there was something else pushing her forward, something within her that said she had to know the truth. The cat, sensing her resolve, gave a soft meow before slipping inside the building through the slightly cracked door. As Sarah entered the dimly lit building, she could feel the cold air wrapping around her like a blanket. The place was eerily silent, the only sound the echo of her footsteps on the dusty floor. The cat, however, was no longer visible. Sarah took a cautious step forward, scanning the space around her. The building was old, the walls covered in peeling paint, and remnants of forgotten furniture lay scattered about. It was as if the place had been abandoned for years. And then Sarah saw it. In the far corner of the room, hidden behind a stack of broken crates, was a small wooden box. The cat, who had been hiding in the shadows, suddenly reappeared, its green eyes glowing in the dim light. It was there, standing next to the box, as though waiting for Sarah to make the next move. Without thinking, Sarah approached the box. It looked old, worn, but there was something undeniably intriguing about it. The cat brushed against her leg as if urging her to open it. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, the sound of the wood creaking in the stillness of the room. Inside the box was a collection of photographs, faded and yellowed with age. They were pictures of people Sarah didn't recognize, strange, cryptic images of individuals standing together in front of what appeared to be the very same building she had just entered. In one photo, a young woman held a cat in her arms, smiling brightly at the camera. Sarah's eyes widened as she noticed something else in the picture. A man standing in the background, his face partially obscured by shadows. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The man in the photograph, he looked so familiar. It was the same man who had been following her, the one who had threatened her that night. The realization hit Sarah like a wave crashing against the shore. This wasn't just about a stray cat. This was about a family secret, one that had been buried for years, hidden within the walls of this very building. Sarah's heart raced as she examined the photographs more closely. The images seemed to tell a story, one that involved a connection between the people in the pictures and the very building she stood in now. It was a tale of betrayal, lost love, and mystery, all entwined with a cat that had crossed her path. But before she could process the magnitude of what she had uncovered, the sound of footsteps broke her concentration. The men had caught up to her. She spun around, her eyes wide with fear. The men were standing in the doorway, their expressions dark and menacing. They had cornered her. The cat, now at her side, hissed loudly, as if to warn them away. It was clear that the men weren't here to discuss the photographs. They were here to silence Sarah. But just as the tension reached its peak, there was a sudden movement behind the men. A figure appeared, stepping out of the shadows. It was the woman from the photograph, the one holding the cat. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The woman looked exactly the same as the one in the image, but there was something different about her. She was no longer a young woman, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The woman stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the men. "Leave her alone," she said, her voice steady and calm. The men hesitated, clearly unnerved by her sudden appearance. "Who are you?" one of them asked, his voice betraying a hint of fear. The woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned her gaze to Sarah. "You found it," she said softly. "The truth. The cat has led you here because it's time for everything to come to light." Sarah was still trying to process the sight of the woman, but the truth was becoming clearer by the second. The cat wasn't just a stray. It was a guardian, a protector, tied to a legacy that had been hidden for too long. The men, now realizing they were no longer in control, exchanged nervous glances. The woman stepped between them and Sarah, her presence commanding the room. "You've been protecting the wrong people," she said to them. "It's time for you to leave." There was a long, tense pause before the men, unwilling to confront the woman any further, turned and fled into the night. As the danger passed, Sarah turned to the woman. "What is all of this?" she asked, still in shock. The woman smiled gently, her eyes full of understanding. "The cat brought you here for a reason. Now that you know the truth, it's time for you to carry the story forward. The legacy that's been hidden for so long, it's yours to tell." With those words, the woman and the cat vanished into the shadows, leaving Sarah standing alone in the abandoned building, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on her shoulders. But one thing was clear: Sarah had uncovered the truth, and now it was her responsibility to share it with the world. The cat had led her to this moment, and it was time for her to honor that legacy. As she left the building, the night sky felt different. The answers she had been searching for were finally within reach, and Sarah knew that she had found something far more important than she could have ever imagined, an untold story waiting to be shared. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the city as Sarah walked back down the quiet street, her thoughts still swirling around the incredible events of the night. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, feeding a stray cat, would lead her to uncover such a profound, life-changing mystery. The cat had not only brought her to a place of hidden truths, but it also revealed a deeper connection to a family history intertwined with loss, love, and betrayal. The photographs she had uncovered in the abandoned building were no longer just old memories. They were pieces of a puzzle that held the key to understanding the cat's extraordinary role in the story. As Sarah looked down at the small wooden box in her hands, She felt a sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The woman from the photograph, the mysterious figure who had appeared just when Sarah needed her most, had entrusted her with a powerful legacy. The cat's guidance had not been random. It was part of something bigger, a story that had waited for someone like her to come along and piece it together. The question now wasn't just about the mystery itself, but about what Sarah would do with the knowledge she had gained. Would she walk away, leave the truth buried in the shadows of that old building? Or would she find a way to share it with the world? The woman's words echoed in her mind. It's time for you to carry the story forward. The legacy that's been hidden for so long, it's yours to tell. Sarah's heart raced as she thought about the people who would be touched by the story. The cat's role as a protector, the woman's connection to a forgotten past, and the men who had tried to erase it all, they were all part of a narrative that was far bigger than Sarah could have ever imagined. The truth had been waiting, hidden in plain sight, and now it was her turn to bring it into the light. As she walked back toward her apartment, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her mind still occupied by everything she had just uncovered. The message on the screen was from a friend she hadn't spoken to in years. It was a simple question. How are you? For a moment, Sarah stared at the text, the weight of everything she had learned settling in. But then a realization washed over her. She wasn't just a passive observer in the story anymore. She was now an active participant, and it was up to her to decide what came next. She quickly typed a reply. I'm doing something I never thought I would. I'm finding the truth and sharing it with the world. In that moment, Sarah understood. This journey wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about changing the narrative, helping others understand the importance of kindness, bravery, and never letting the past fade into oblivion. The cat, with its quiet wisdom and unfailing guidance, had brought her to this point for a reason. Sarah wasn't meant to hide the truth. She was meant to tell it, to share it with anyone who would listen. But her journey was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions, many pieces of the puzzle left to discover. What had happened to the woman in the photograph? How had she become so deeply connected to the cat and its mysterious past? And most importantly, what would happen next in the story that Sarah was now responsible for telling? With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah felt the weight of the box in her hands, the photographs within it offering a glimpse into a world she was only beginning to understand. She knew this was just the beginning. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet predict, but she was ready for whatever came next. As Sarah approached her apartment building, she took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She had already made the decision to carry the story forward, to share the truth with others, no matter the cost. But for now, she needed to gather her thoughts to prepare for the next steps. The truth she had uncovered would shake the foundation of everything she thought she knew, but Sarah was no longer afraid. She had been chosen for this journey, and she wasn't about to back down. If you've been captivated by this incredible story, don't let it end here. Join Sarah on her journey to uncover the rest of the mystery, and follow her path as she learns more about the legacy that the cat has so carefully guided her toward. Be a part of this unfolding tale, and subscribe now to stay up to date with the latest chapters. The story has just begun, and you won't want to miss what happens next.